Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Coronavirus cases are surging to new highs in communities across the United States as fall weather sets in, with over 54,000 new infections reported Tuesday and 20 states reaching record highs for the disease. Oklahoma City officials say they've run out of intensive care beds. Bismarck, North Dakota reported it's just a single ICU bed remaining. And 6 major hospitals in Mississippi have no ICU capacity. Officially, there have been nearly 216,000 deaths from COVID-19 this year in the U.S., but a new study in the Journal of the American Medical Association predicts up to 400,000 pandemic-related U.S. deaths in 2020. This comes as the Washington Post and New York Times report Trump administration officials say they've adopted a policy of deliberately letting the virus infect much of the U.S. population in order to attain herd immunity. Health experts warn the strategy might not even be possible and could lead to more than 2 million U.S. deaths. In Geneva, Switzerland, the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said Monday herd immunity should only be reached through vaccination, not natural infection.
Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Never in the history of public health has herd immunity been used as a strategy for responding to an outbreak, let alone a pandemic. It's scientifically and ethically problematic.
Barely a week after he was released from Walter Reed Hospital, where Trump was treated for COVID-19, he continues to hold packed campaign rallies where masks are rarely worn and social distancing not observed. On Tuesday, President Trump rallied supporters in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He's planning a rally in Des Moines, Iowa today, a state experiencing a record-high hospitalization rate. Meanwhile, the Labor Department admitted late Tuesday the wife of Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia has COVID-19. Trish Scalia has not said when she first tested positive. She was seated next to presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway at the now infamous super spreader event at the White House Rose Garden on September 26. Kellyanne Conway is COVID positive. The White House has refused to carry out contact tracing on its outbreak. A crowdsourced COVID-19 data tracker has identified 39 positive coronavirus cases linked to the White House, including the president and the First Lady. Pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly has suspended clinical trials of its monoclonal antibody drug over an unspecified potential safety concern. President Trump touted a similar drug, produced by Regeneron, as a cure for COVID-19 after he received a dose while hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Center earlier this month. Both Eli Lilly and Regeneron have applied for emergency use authorizations of their antibody therapies. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett was back on Capitol Hill Tuesday for a second day of confirmation hearings. During 11 hours of questioning, Barrett repeatedly refused to say how she would rule on several key issues, from abortion to health care to voting rights. She also declined to say whether she would recuse herself if the outcome of the 2020 election is decided by the Supreme Court. We'll have the latest on Judge Barrett's nomination after headlines. An FBI agent testified Tuesday. Members of a far-right anti-government group charged with plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer also plan to target Virginia's Democratic Governor Ralph Northam. Members of the so-called Wolverine Watchmen were reportedly angered by Governor Northam's lockdown measures aimed at slowing the spread of coronavirus. In Richmond, Virginia, Dr. Northam blamed President Trump's rhetoric for inciting far-right violence.
These threats are not coming, and this rhetoric is not coming from another country. It's coming from Washington. And that I regret, and it needs to stop.
As coronavirus lockdowns remain in effect last April, President Trump tweeted, quote, "Liberate Virginia and save your great Second Amendment. It's under siege." Trump tweeted, "Liberate Michigan," that same day. In Washington state, more eyewitnesses have stepped forward to corroborate claims that police made no attempt to arrest the anti-fascist activist Michael Rhino on September 3rd before they killed him in a hail of gunfire. All but one of 22 eyewitnesses interviewed by the New York Times report police did not identify themselves or give Rhino any commands before opening fire. 5 of the witnesses said officers began shooting the instant their unmarked vehicles converged on Rhino, who was reportedly shot dead as he chewed on candy, clutching a cell phone in one hand and a bag in the other. President Trump previously called the shooting retribution after Rhino allegedly killed a far-right Trump supporter in Portland, Oregon. On Tuesday, Trump raised the case again during his campaign rally in Pennsylvania.
2 days went by, 3 days went by. I said, why the hell haven't they arrested him? And they knew who he was. And we sent in the U.S. Marshals, and in 15 minutes it was all over. That was the end of it. That was the end of it.
At Tuesday's rally, President Trump also appealed to suburban white women voters, boasting he'd repealed fair housing regulations introduced by President Obama meant to expand low-income housing opportunities in the suburbs.
So can I ask you to do me a favor? Suburban women, would you please like me? Remember? Please. Please. I saved your damn neighborhood, okay?
The Trump administration's been ramping up subsidies to farmers ahead of Election Day as payments are projected to reach a record $46 billion this year. Farmers have been hit hard by Trump's ongoing trade disputes with China and Europe, as well as the coronavirus pandemic. Ken Cook of the Environmental Working Group said, quote, "This is an authoritarian power grab used to buy political support from voters who are essential to his reelection." The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday the Trump administration can order the Census Bureau to halt its 2020 count a month early, dealing a major blow to civil rights groups. Advocates say the decision will lead to a vast undercount of immigrants in communities of color, with huge implications for voting rights and the fair allocation of federal funds. In a lone dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote, quote, "The harms caused by rushing this year's census count are irreparable, and respondents will suffer their lasting impact for at least the next 10 years, she said. In Virginia, a cable that was allegedly cut by accident caused the state's entire online voter registration to crash for hours Tuesday on the deadline to register to vote in Virginia before Election Day. Voting rights activists condemned state election officials for the malfunction, warning it likely left thousands of eligible voters unable to register. A similar error happened in 2016. There's now a lawsuit that will be heard in court today to extend the deadline. On Tuesday, early voting got underway in Texas with massive crowds waiting in line for hours. Similar scenes played out in Georgia Monday as early voting got underway there. Meanwhile, a federal court in Texas upheld a directive by Republican Governor Greg Abbott limiting ballot drop boxes sites to 1 per county, including Harris County, home to 4.5 million people, a disproportionate number of whom are Democratic voters. California's Republican Party has admitted to deceiving voters by placing dozens of falsely labeled drop boxes for mail-in ballots in Los Angeles, Fresno, and Orange counties. California's Secretary of State has sent cease and desist orders to Republican officials, warning anyone distributing phony mail-in ballot boxes could be subject to criminal prosecution. In immigration news, over 100 asylum seekers from Cameroon were deported en masse Tuesday afternoon, despite congressional intervention and efforts from activists who held an action at the Fort Worth Alliance Airport in Texas to try to stop the deportation flights. Among those deported were several leaders of a hunger strike at Pine Prairie Detention Center in Louisiana and 2 Cameroonian women who fear they were unknowingly subjected to forced sterilizations at Irwin Detention Center in Georgia. Immigration rights groups say ICE agents coerced the asylum seekers into signing the deportation orders after months of torture and abuse. The asylum seekers say they were held in solitary confinement after joining hunger strikes. Many of them fear they'll be killed upon their arrival to Cameroon. This is one of the Cameroonian asylum seekers speaking from an ICE prison.
We are under ICE custody, which they keep on giving us torture for several years. They keeping us, and they want to send us back to our country, which it is viral. So many of us, if we return back to our country, you are going to be homeless. My mom was shot in front of me. Just imagine what is happening to our country.
The Mexican government says it's identified at least 2 women who may have been subjected to invasive gynecological surgeries without their consent while imprisoned at Irwin Detention Center in Georgia. One of the women reportedly says she was operated on without receiving an explanation of the procedure or her medical diagnosis in Spanish. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. border security agents working in Guatemala detained and deported a group of Honduran asylum seekers in an unauthorized operation last January. U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents are stationed across Latin America to train local authorities in U.S. immigration and border enforcement tactics. But the State Department prohibits them from engaging in any direct immigration enforcement operations in foreign countries. The recent findings were published by Democrats in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who say this is the first known case of U.S. agents involved in the physical deportation of asylum seekers in a foreign country. A federal prosecutor has found no evidence of wrongdoing in an investigation into allegations that former Obama administration officials illegally unmasked the names of Americans whose communications were swept up in foreign surveillance. Attorney General William Barr ordered the investigation after President Trump and some Republican lawmakers accused the Obama administration of a political conspiracy. No report has been issued. And in Belarus, government officials have threatened to kill anti-government protesters, saying police are allowed to shoot at dissenters with live ammunition. This comes as mass mobilizations continue to demand new elections after longtime authoritarian President Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory in a poll that opponents say was rigged. Pensioners joined the protest Monday as demands mounted for Lukashenko's resignation.
It hurts me that the authorities are doing God knows what to our children. I want our children to have a say, to have rights. They must be able to protect themselves. I want us to have a new free election and for political prisoners to be freed.
This comes as the European Union Monday agreed to impose sanctions personally targeting President Lukashenko. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York City, joined by my co-host Juan Gonzalez from his home in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.